Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. That was, I think, a really interesting review with the head of Build. Yesterday, we had a interview with the economist with the CMHC. I've had real estate developers on my show. I've had realtors on my show. I've had developers. I've had planners. I've had architects. I've had city planners. I've had transit people. I've had the benefit of a lot of different people that have come and chatted with me, and they've all, I think, consistently suggested that the problem with the housing market, and particularly the problem with affordable housing, is not a market problem. It's a government problem, and it's a local government problem primarily. And I think we need to call a spade, and we need to call out our local governments that are creating a problem of lack of supply and lack of affordable supply, and exasperating the situation, making it even worse. And so I've got 6 or 7 reasons why the problem is what it is, and that suggests some solutions for it. The first and probably the most important one is the restrictions that local governments put in place in, number one, the time that it takes to get approval, and number two, the bureaucracy involved in getting the approval. And I really think that this regulatory impediment is almost greater in real estate than it is on almost any other segment of our economy. And, it's interesting and ironic that we think about real estate development as one of the most capitalist-oriented, free enterprise-oriented businesses, but it's got more regulatory fingers into the pie. From the time to get approval, that it's got to be in accordance with a official plan and a secondary plan and building permits, and then they get involved from a heritage standpoint and a conservation standpoint and a zoning standpoint, and then does the architecture right, etc. The regulatory process that builders, developers have to go through is greater than you would if you were launching a product. And I used to be in the pharmaceutical business. You had to do studies and prove that they worked. And then you had to prove it to the FDA. But they didn't tell you what bottle it had to be in, didn't tell you what size it had to be in, didn't tell you what color it had to be in. It didn't have the same kind of, they were worried about what they should be worried about, which was safety and efficacy. That was it. And that, you had a good disclaimer in regards to side effects. But it wasn't as impactful as negatively impactful as all of the regulatory impediments the government puts in place. Then number three, it's the informal stuff that the regulatory process puts in place, where you've got a planning department and a city councilor and a mayor that may all agree and may not all agree. And people tell me over and over again, you got to get the city councilor to agree. And it's almost as if it was, the city councilor was a czar in their local area, and they trade off for parks and section whatever 67s and other things. They want daycares and streets and other issues, almost like they were the czar of a local area, the lord of a local fiefdom. That's wrong. You wouldn't, again, have that in any other segment of our industrial society, but for some reason we accept it in real estate, and I think it's a mistake. So what does it lead to? It leads to less development, slower development, increased costs in land carry, interest carry, discount rates that apply, high discount rates that apply for a longer time period, such that it is more costly to build, and so therefore you end up having you build less, or you build more expensively, or you charge more, and it leads to less supply, and the supply that gets built is less affordable. I think there's some other things. I've had a couple of shows on the missing middle, where people have described how we either zone for condos or for single family homes. So 100 units per acre and greater, or 6 units per acre or less. When the vast majority of people say, supposedly in study after study, they actually like the 20 to 40 acres per acre that you would get in Port Credit, or in Streetsville, or in Bloor West Village, or in the Beaches, or in Kitsilano, or the North End, and example after example. And people like the brownstones in Manhattan, or the old pre-war homes in Bloor West Village. But you don't build those. And the United States right now, and in Vancouver, they're looking at laneway homes. They're looking at homes built out of garages, homes that basement apartments, making it more affordable for people to bring in homes in higher density than single family, but lower density than huge apartment buildings or condos. New technology. I had a show on this week in regards to prefab homes built out of containers. I think there is new technology out there, and we've got to make it more easy for developers to try out those new technologies and build them. Stick build that to 6 to 8 to 12 stories is just as safe from a fire standpoint as concrete or steel. But we have regulatory impediments that don't allow you to build it, and I think that's wrong. And then I think most importantly, from a supply standpoint, that you've got official plans and zoning that is not consistent with what we need. That's either in place in the places to grow legislation, and/or in what we all know needs to take place in regards to the expansion of housing in Toronto. The head of Build, David Wilkes, told me that 4.5 million people are moving to Toronto in the next 30 years. I've been told that the population the size of Montreal is moving to Toronto in the next 10 to 15 years. Where are we going to put these people? We just don't have enough supply, and cities aren't zoning consistent with what we need to have from a density standpoint. And the city of Toronto is launching this major new zoning, which is asking if we're going to increase the zoning along major boulevards and around transit nodes. And the answer has got to be clearly yes. Let's get on with it. And you think about Humber Bay Shores, which used to be a bunch of low-rise strip motels. That's now one of the most dynamic, most beautiful condo markets, maybe with development density comparable to Yonge and Eglinton. Why don't we have those in more places? Why? It's beautiful. People love it. And not only the people that live there, but people that want to go shop, go to restaurants, and walk around there. And you could have that in more places. And the Mr. Christie site is going to be another example. I think that the Etobicoke GO train station that's under development with a couple million square feet of development is another example. 6 Points in Etobicoke is another example. The old Lever site across from the Distillery District is another example. Downsview Airport is another example. I could go on. And we should be developing those, and we should be making it easier and quicker for people to develop those. Industrial sites that are zoned industrial, that could be mixed use, could have some development. Development and retail sites in what people call the yellow belt or the white belt, with its inside the green belt, that have zoning that is far less than should be achieved. Jennifer Keesmaat, the former chief planner of Toronto, that told me that zoning was increased along Yonge Street when they built the Yonge line, but wasn't along the Bloor-Danforth area. And you know it, we don't have a comparable to Yonge and Eglinton along the Bloor-Danforth line. And we could at a couple different transit spots. And there has this sort of attitude of NIMBYism in regards to, well, I don't want that zoning because it's going to impact my whole neighborhood. But if you take a look at Yonge Street, there is development at those major intersections, but half a block away, it isn't. It's single family homes. And so we should at, Yonge and Lawrence, Yonge and St. Clair, Yonge and Shepherd, Yonge and Finch, Yonge and Steeles, if it goes up, Yonge and Highway 7, if it goes up. We should allow and incentivize higher rise development, greater density development, because that's what we need. And the same thing around GO train stations. So my bottom line is the crisis with housing prices in general, which are too high in the Greater Toronto Area, and with affordability, which is way too, affordability is not there, non-existent, and frankly, just the amount of housing that we need over the course of the next 10 years with the city of Montreal moving here, or 30 years with 4.5 million people here, is primarily due to local government not doing what it needs to do, and in fact, standing in the way. And I could mention development fees that every developer has told me are charged in the wrong way and are a disincentive to development. And then transit. I think we need to build transit. We've been talking about regional express rail, all day two-way GO, smart tracks for too long. Let's get on and build it. And frankly, bottom line, in the end, highways. We haven't built highways other than the 407 in what, 30 years? We need some highways because people are going to be moving to Milton, to Caledon, um, to the northern ends of York Region. They are, because the dream still is a single family home, and we've got to make it available, and we've got to make it available inside the greenbelt. And so therefore we've got to build highways to get them to and from work. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth on the lack of housing, on housing prices that are too high, and on affordability that just doesn't exist. Thanks for listening. Good night.